unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty, brought to you in partnership with MyPillow.com. Great folks, buy their stuff. When you page through the Gospels, you see that very little of Jesus' life was spent in public. First off, he lived 33 years, roughly, but the first 30 that we know next to nothing about. And what is recorded in Scripture comes to us from the only eyewitness to the events there in his first 30 years, who would have been by the time it was all being recorded. That is, of course, his blessed mother, Mary. As for the final 3 years, the Gospels record what are essentially highlights, to put it bluntly. Yes, they are critical, but as St. John tells us not once but twice at the end of his Gospel, the vast majority, most of what Jesus said and did is simply not written down. And oddly enough, considering how relatively little is recorded about Jesus, it's interesting that the four evangelists would take time to tell us about how Jesus went off to pray. It's pretty cool, actually. The incarnate eternal Logos retreating to a mountaintop or small cave or wherever to commune with the Trinity, of which, of course, he is a person, the second person. But the difference would be, unlike before the incarnation in Our Lady's womb, he now brought his human nature into the Trinity. So what was he praying about? What was he asking for? Well, apparently he never told that to the apostles, or if he did, they did not feel the need to record it, nor did they feel the need to tell the two non-apostle evangelists, Mark and Luke. What we do know is that prayer, which is what Holy Mother Church tells us is the lifting of the heart, mind, and soul to God, communing with him in our entire being, is necessary. Even the apostles themselves got the hint. Master, teach us how to pray. How we pray, the words we use, the silence we sit in, is really all secondary to the actual act of praying. They're important, of course, but words can become rote. Silence can give way to mental distraction. What matters most is the absorption of our totality in the act of praying. Now, to that end, I'd like to share a particular prayer with you that's part of my personal morning prayer. I received this prayer from my therapist, who's a very good, solid Catholic man here in Greater Houston, who's helping me greatly face the fears of severe childhood trauma. Here's how this prayer goes. Praise to you, O Christ, for the victory of your glorious cross. Through the power of your death and resurrection, be our champion over the evil that afflicts us, the sickness of our bodies, the errors of our minds, the confusion of our feelings, the guilt of our consciences, the brokenness of our relationships, and the weakness of our faith. Make good our hope in you, and restore us now and forever to your glory, O crucified and risen Lord. Amen. Sometimes we pray best in our shatteredness, asking heaven to help us put things back together, or conquer evil that happened to us and then that we responded to poorly. It's a pretty genuine prayer and is born from a certain hope, as it says there in the end, which is, of course, one of the three supernatural virtues. If you find this particular prayer helpful in your circumstances, well, feel free to plagiarize. Now, moving on to today's topic. During an exorcism, as it's winding down and the demon or demons have finally surrendered the person back to the church, exorcists will tell you they make great noise and stink, literally stink the joint up on their way back to hell. Kind of a parting shot, you might say. They don't leave easily, nor do they leave without much commotion, but they do leave. Well, on an earthly level, we see the same type of things in the party of death, controlled by the demonic. It's just days away from departing the halls of power in D.C., at least surrendering the control that they've enjoyed up to now. And yeah, we know the analogy of demons leaving in an exorcism with Dems surrendering control is not complete. No analogy ever is, but it is illustrative. It does make a point. The party, as well as various Republicans, are evil-minded, and they participate in the destruction of life, and they advance misery through their policies and so forth. Likewise, on the other side of the coin, Donald Trump is not the savior, nor has he ever claimed to be. He is, however, to some degree, a bringer of justice, a restorer of sorts, you could say. And on their way out the door, the demonic Democrats and the uniparty types are not going away quietly. Joining him now to talk about all of this is Souls and Liberty contributor, fellow contributor, Stephen Wynn. Stephen, how you doing, brother?
Doing well, thank you.
All right, well, let's start with a brief clip, shall we, from Mark Halperin's political podcast he does just about every day, talking about Joe Biden's final days. It's pretty interesting. Take a listen.
Very rare to have leaking out of the Biden administration, particularly leaking that involves finger pointing. And yet on the story about the president's decision to quash Nippon Steel acquisition of U.S. Steel, there was a big Washington Post story with lots of accounts of national security officials named saying the political people did this and this was a bad idea. That comes amidst Joe Biden, a flurry of activities, starting with the pardons and the commutations, but a bunch of other stuff. And now NBC says he's going to give two big farewell speeches. Dan, how would you describe the goal or goals of all these moves by Joe Biden?
Well, to some level, it's a traditional, path, which is the last few months, you give legacy-setting speeches, you issue executive orders, which we talked about kind of, a month and a half ago. Like, why isn't he doing some of this stuff? Why is he always on vacation? He should be traveling, awarding presidential medals of freedom. Like, I know some of these angered people, but like, this is what presidents do in their last few months. I think where he's getting into trouble is he sounds kind of bitter and resentful and almost like the election didn't happen. Like he kind of can't come to terms with the country voted for the agenda that Donald Trump put forth and is about to go enact. And so I think in that regard, usually presidents put on the happy face and are optimistic in their kind of farewell speeches. Biden just doesn't sound like he's there.
Sean.
Yeah, I got to say, Dan mentioned this. We talked about this, like 45 days ago.
Yeah.
Try to get your legacy intact by doing all this crazy left-wing stuff. Now, just to be clear, I don't want that to happen. So from an American standpoint, a conservative standpoint, I'm glad he didn't. But the idea that suddenly now 14 days from leaving office, he's finally doing all this stuff that we said 2 months ago. Like, this is what you should have been doing at the end of November, December, flooding the zone, awarding every left-wing nut job with some kind of award, traveling to all your crazy places, banning offshore drilling like he's trying to do today. I mean, it's like they said, why don't you take 30 days off? We'll come up with a list and then you can just, do it at the end. We didn't talk about this, but he teed off on reporters last night. To Dan's point, I mean, he sounds like a bitter old man.
All right, Stephen, a lot of that stuff is pretty interesting in that discussion. So let's start with the pardon, or I should say pardons, especially for Hunter, but also for killers. I mean, unrepentant killers, on death row and all of that. The most pardons ever granted by a U.S. president. He's still got about 2 weeks to go. The one exception, of course, being Jimmy Carter, who wrote like a blanket pardon for all the Vietnam stuff. So it was like 250,000. But these are all folks named individually, specifically. When you add in Sean Spicer's conclusion there that Biden sounds like a bitter old man on his way out the door, a lot of stuff there. A lot of stuff. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. It's Biden's actions in the past several days have just been nothing short of cynical. Basically, enacting one order after another, the pardons, basically in a giant FU to Trump, to MAGA, to all the folks who voted Republican on November 5th. But even more than that, it really is. He's giving the middle finger to the American people as a whole. Basically, commuting sentences for violent, and I mean violent offenders. It is so misplaced, his thinking, his actions, basically, what little justice these folks have gotten, as a result of family members, loved ones being sexually assaulted, raped, murdered. And now he wants to soften that, quote unquote, soften that. It really is just a denial of justice. And it just shows how really anti-American he ultimately is.
Yeah. I mean, you look at some of this stuff and, the party of death is a good label for the Democrats. So certainly not alone. There are Republicans. So if you think of it in terms of the uniparty is the party of death, that's probably more accurate. But every single Democrat is a member in D.C. is a member of the uniparty. But, you look at Democratic policies, Kathy Hochul and her, the subways in New York City are safe. And she says that, and, an immigrant who'd been arrested, I think 32 times, just set some lady on fire. And the New York City police are walking past it. There's that video on X. There's a cop walking right past the open doors with her ablaze, holding on to a thing. And then there's the stabbings and the rapes that go on there. And I mean, they just have no concern. Of course, now her, congestion tax or whatever, the usage fee, whatever it's called, keeping the streets and boroughs and everything, the roadways all clear of traffic has forced everybody onto the subways. And, look, there's loonies there. I mean, the last guy they just pulled off for the stabbing had been arrested, 83 times? I mean, 83 times, I don't even know how you can get arrested 83 times. But when these loons go loose and they're in a much more crowded subway car, because, Hochul's tax has forced them there, if one of the loonies goes crazy and a bunch of guys jump on to save the other people and themselves and everything. I mean, is Alvin Bragg going to have them arrested and put on trial and, their policies are destructive of normal, everyday people from the womb all the way up.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely anti-American. I mean, basically charging, folks entering Manhattan from outer boroughs $10 a head, or $10 basically to get into the central city. Now, is that going to hurt someone driving in from the Hamptons in a limo or a Porsche? No, of course not. It's going to hurt the middle class, the lower middle class, the poor workers in Queens who are trying to get into their jobs in the city. If they choose to continue to drive, it's and all for the sake of lessening congestion, being better for the environment, and so forth. It's yet another tax, basically, that undermines.
Of course, it's a tax.
Yeah, absolutely.
You drive on this road. We're going to take money from you. That's a tax.
Yep, exactly, and it just further under it's another blow to the heart of working Americans, basically. And yeah, if they choose to take public transportation as an alternative, as you said, the subways are now a nightmare. The woman who's burned alive, obviously that got a lot of press because of the horror of that case. But literally every day there's some insane attack that occurs, as you said, stabbings.
And besides that, there's just the level of fear. I mean, even if you, somebody's going. I mean, there's video, on Twitter. I don't know. The Democrats don't seem to know that there's a thing called social media. They really don't seem to realize that. And there's video of I don't know if he's a homeless guy, but he's certainly mentally disturbed. Video I saw the other day, and here's a guy. I don't know how to say it politely, taking a dump on the subway. He's got his pants pulled down and he's, quasi squatting and everything. And there's nothing left of the imagination in the video. I mean, that's what he's doing. A poorer family that has their maybe, 7, 8, 9-year-old happens to be sitting next to a guy like that. I mean, you shouldn't be forced into a situation where this sort of stuff happens. And, Kathy Hochul, fake Catholic governor of New York. Oh, the subways are safe. Oh, we've deployed all these more people. Well, you've deployed all these more cops, and you have forced hundreds of thousands of more people into it. And I'll tell you one thing. I cannot imagine that people who would go normally drive into Manhattan, this is probably more middle class kind of thing, drive into Manhattan from one of the outer boroughs or somewhere else in Manhattan, and say, oh, let's just go have like a nice meal and maybe, I don't know, go, watch an off-Broadway show or something like that. Who could afford to drive, but are now like, I don't know, I don't want to get stuck with this. And, we regret, those people are not getting on the subways at night. No way in hell. I mean, I lived in New York City in the 80s, and it was a little dicey then. You had to kind of like keep your head on a swivel and all that. But now with people like their faces staring at cell phones all the time, earbuds on, the Sony Walkmans were kind of a thing back then. But most people were just, had their eyes and their ears wide open. That's not the case now. And, I can't imagine anybody with any sort of normal thing hopping on a subway, as after the sun has gone down, because of who comes out after the sun goes down. It's crazy.
Right.
It's a party of death.
It is.
Their policies are all about, they don't care about the little guy.
Right, 100%, and it's not just anymore. It's not just after the sun goes down. There was a clip posted to X a couple of days ago. Basically, high noon, a guy pushed another commuter onto the tracks literally a second before the subway arrived in the station. Thankfully, he survived, but he was critically injured. He was just basically waiting for the train, looking down at his cell phone, and some nut comes by and just randomly attack. And that's the thing; it was a random attack. These attacks are just completely random. You never know what's going to be happening. So, I mean, public defecation. Unfortunately, that's the least of worries for New York commuters. And you brought up a very good point there. There are people in the outer boroughs who might want to come in, say from the Hamptons or whatever more middle class areas. They've got some money to spend, but they're going to think twice about coming into the city with all of this. That hurts Manhattan business owners, the small business owners, restaurants, theaters, and so forth. But the Democrats don't care. They don't care as long as they enact policies to just reinforce their ideology, and ultimately it totally undercuts the welfare of the American people.
Yeah, it's also I've gotten back and forth because again I have the advantage of living in New York not once but twice. My first job was in New York, and I lived down in the Village for a little bit, for 8 months, 9 months or so. And even then, I was leery about taking the subway. I mean, CBS is on West 57th Street. I lived down on the corner of Bleecker and McDougal in the Village. I can't remember. I don't know if it was the A line. I can't remember which train it was. But my shift at CBS was kind of all over the map. Sometimes I was there in the early morning because I worked on CBS Morning News with Bill Curtis and Diane Sawyer. And I'd have to get on the train at like 2 in the morning, and it was like it was mostly deserted at that point. But there were times I was coming back at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I was not, I was looking around constantly, and just being, I'm alive. I haven't been pushed in front of a subway car, so I guess my awareness helped me. But now, so I'm getting into this on Twitter X with an awful lot of New Yorkers are like, we don't want all the air pollution down here. One guy said, why don't you wrap your mouth around a dirty tailpipe on a car and just inhale? I'm like, there are, roughly 47% of Americans that actually believe all this crap. And they're like brain numbed from living in those urban areas. And they just don't care. They've become numb to the mayhem and forgetting about the tax. Why would anybody live in New York City anymore? Is just kind of a normal. I just get up. I live in New York City. Oh, because it's fun. What's fun? Like being randomly attacked, shoved in front of a subway car, watching the guy next to you rip his pants down and just poop on the subway floor right next to you. The stench in New York City. Garbage night is Sunday night in Manhattan. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's got to smell like something of what like Gehenna smelled like. I mean, sure, if you're a multi-zillionaire and you live on, the 93rd floor of some penthouse somewhere and, you pay people to go do all that stuff for you, sure. But I mean, New York is a hellhole. And, the Hamas Al Qaeda crap demonstrations that happened, over the weekend or end of last week. With the in conjunction with the New Orleans attack, just random BLM crap that can just start at any moment somewhere. I mean, I'm sorry, living in that kind of constant, I might not be safe environment. I just think that's way psychologically damaging.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just New York. It's tragic to see what's happened to New York, widely regarded as our greatest city, maybe the greatest city in the world. But it's every city in every blue state where they've had similar problems going on in Los Angeles with the public transportation system there. Of course, San Francisco these days, its condition is legendary. They literally have maps pointing out all the public defecation points basically spread out across the city, needles everywhere. American cities used to have a reputation for being almost like Dubai is today.
Right.
But in the past decade plus, they're just careening toward third world status, basically. And again, it's because of these diseased, warped, anti-American, anti-prosperity policies that the Party of Death is instituting, and just seems hell bent, literally, on clinging to. And just like Hochul did in New York, proclaiming the subways are safe, everything is fine here. Nothing to see here. Look away. Even as a woman burns to death, it's just absolutely maddening, because they're telling us that what we're seeing, we're not really seeing it.
Yeah, don't believe your lying eyes.
Right. Absolutely. It's just maddening.
Yeah,
And this policy, it's not just, these policies are not just impacting, America at the city or state level. Nationally, this same kind of anti-American ethos is just being rammed through, even in the final days of the Biden presidency. Just a couple of days ago, Biden basically signed a last-minute order barring oil drilling, oil exploration from Alaska, 44 million acres in Alaska alone, but also off the coasts of the west coast of the United States, the east coast, the eastern part of the Gulf Coast, and so basically curtailing any hope of economic development, energy-based economic development, which is absolutely key to America's recovery. But he doesn't care. He's not interested in a prosperous, thriving America. It's cynical, it's disgusting, and again, thank God, literally, that Trump is coming into power in just a few days.
We are days away. That order will be overturned, I think. And yes. I don't know, how many. Trump should probably just have the inauguration in the Oval Office and then take 5 steps over to his desk and start signing executive orders overturning everything Biden has done. But I do want to move on for a little bit here, Stephen, on the question of the awarding of the Presidential Medal of Freedom that happened essentially to 3 gangsters. And I didn't say gangstas. I said gangsters, because they are. The first one is Hillary Clinton. Here she is. Like, are you kidding me? It's hard to even know where to begin with Hillary. Medal of Freedom, Benghazi and our embassy personnel being killed on her watch, and she ignored it. Then she lied about it and covered it all up. Remember that famous line of her in front of the congressional committee? What difference does it make now? Well, she does not deserve a Medal of Freedom. She deserves handcuffs, is what she deserves. The email server with her 33,000 emails on it, being demolished and bleached. Bleach is like you run bleach over it. Paying for the Steele dossier, pack of lies. Put together so that they could put something in front of a federal judge and lie to the federal court and say, oh, here's all this information we have. They gave it to the FBI. They go to court. They get the FISA warrant to begin spying on Trump. And she knew all along it was a pack of crap. So, Medal of Freedom to Hillary Clinton. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. It's just galling. It's just, it's almost, I don't know, it's political theater to the absurd, it's I would argue she has done more to decimate the integrity of this country, the health of this country, than any woman since Margaret Sanger, basically. And the fact, I mean, she is synonymous with corruption. That's why she wasn't elected in 2016, not because she's a woman, but because she's that woman. She's Hillary Clinton, and
she's that woman.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And she, she along with Bill are really, they are responsible for beginning to poison the waters of American politics. People lament how divided we are as a country these days. That stretches back to the early 1990s when Clinton and Hill took power, basically. Yeah. And it's just gotten worse and worse since then. She feeds it and has fed it for 30 years. And so, yeah, it's just... It's the height of arrogance and, again, just anti-Americanism to award. She's a traitorous Jezebel in my mind, and to award her.
Oh, she's much worse than that. I mean, that's on a good day. That's when she just wakes up in the morning.
Okay. Yes. So to recognize her, to honor her in that way is just an insult to the American people.
Yeah, it really is. It insults everything that America stands for. The history, the people, the soldiers and military personnel have died, on the shores of Tripoli and Normandy and all over the world, including the U.S. Embassy in Libya. So something she was never, held accountable for. All right, so we move on to the second of the gangsters, Liz Cheney. Here she is getting the Medal of Freedom. What did she do? Well, she withheld evidence in her J6 committee, where she sat there as, the condemning queen of the South, withholding evidence that exonerated Trump from their charges that he inspired an insurrection. And then she destroyed that evidence. Once it became clear that Trump was going to win and did win, they destroyed the evidence, got rid of it. She, in particular, was anxious to get Trump and prevent him from winning again because of her involvement in the war machine, the industrial military war complex, which her father, Dick Cheney, was a master at. And, again, all her family members are, related to, involved in. I mean, they make their living off that war machine. So when Trump's parading around the country for, 9-10 months, whatever it was, the campaign, saying we're going to stop these unnecessary wars, we're not going to be involved in these things, all that. I mean, it's the whole defense mechanism of the United States, the way it operates currently. All of a sudden was like, well, crap, we won't get our trillions of dollars in government funds. So, and there is, of course, the hell hath no fury thing about a woman. Trump had her trounced in her congressional reelection 3 cycles ago. He had her destroyed. And as we all know, I think many of us have probably encountered a woman that when something doesn't go their way, they make it their life's goal to destroy you. And, some men are like that, but, there is no saying that hell hath no fury like a man's scorn. There is the saying of that. And Liz Cheney, even so much as even going campaigning with Kamala. I mean, why don't you just give Kamala the Medal of Freedom?
Yeah.
Along with a bottle of bourbon.
Giving Liz Cheney the Medal of Freedom is just, again, it's more cynicism, it's political BS is what it is. And the fact, and you're right, it's, she's had this personal vendetta against Trump for however long, a long time. And you're right, the Cheneys never met a war they didn't like, and she's been hell-bent on safeguarding her interest, her family's interest as well. She I'm sure she loved the halls of power in D.C. and the fact that Trump, through his influence, helped deny her that. Well, she wants to deny him freedom. But the thing is that I just find so galling is they don't care. She doesn't care. She and people like her don't care about the collateral damage.
Right.
They don't care that they injure others. Whether it's in war. Oh, we lost thousands of troops because of the Iraq War. Well, there are.
Oh yeah, I mean when you add up not just the physical deaths there, but the injuries, the missing limbs, massive PTSD. The emotional health damage, destruction of these young mostly men's souls, and they come back home, and then they're many of them turn to horrible addictions, drugs, sex, booze, whatever, to try to cope with the horrors of what they saw there. Liz Cheney doesn't give a damn about those people. She doesn't care at all. That's just it's never their kids. It's never their kids that are off fighting in the war. Even Beau Biden. I mean, he wasn't, there on the front line shooting and taking shrapnel and grenades being thrown into the foxhole and all that sort of stuff. And he didn't die anyway over there. He just, came back here and died of leukemia a few years after he was honorably discharged. But that war machine doesn't give a rip about the casualties to Americans. It's horrible.
Right, absolutely, and this same pattern has held true for her work with the January 6th committee. Over 1,600 Americans have been prosecuted for their role in the insurrection, the quote unquote riot of January 6th, 2021. I mean, people to this day are languishing in prison. Some of them having never been charged. They have literally been rotting in prison for over 3 years without going to trial, without having basically being given their opportunity to fight, to clear their name for justice, basically. And on
that point, Stephen, I think it's important to point out here the lingering effects of this. Yes, I mean all the talk in the world is Trump's going to come in and just execute a blanket pardon. Maybe not for people who actually were assaulting, police officers, but I mean, that's not the vast majority of the people by far. Most people are just like walking through the Capitol, staying inside the velvet ropes as they're destroying democracy with their flags. And, but, they've been arrested and charged with federal crimes, and you can get pardoned from the legal consequences of it. But, if you want to hop on a plane, your name's now on a watch list. If you want to apply for a job, you have a federal criminal record. There's no way to expunge that. I mean, this is following you around now. It's like, and again, she doesn't care. That Benny Johnson doesn't care. Adam Kinzinger doesn't care. Nobody on, Jamie Raskin on that J6 committee doesn't care. They're well insulated, well protected. Again, what are we talking about in the theme of the show here? That this is what they do on the way out. The committee, of course, was while it was going on, but now they're done. So now let's just award everybody who did this with another little freedom and make it look like this, that, or the other. It's bullshit. From first to last, it's evil. It's rotten. It's to legitimize their evil. Putting a ribbon around their necks, really, with the Medal of Freedom on it. It's disgusting. It really is. There's no words for it. Honestly, there's no words for it. All those people need to be arrested and put on trial for treason is what needs to happen. All of them, including Liz Cheney.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I can't add anything further other than just to say that, the Medal of Freedom is the antithesis of what should be awarded to those folks. Liz Cheney has assaulted the liberty of hundreds of Americans for personal gain. Basically, she should not be commended. She should not be honored. She should be prosecuted.
Absolutely. And our third gangster, not even an American, George Soros. He's the award was given to his son, or presented to his son, who accepted it on behalf of his father. I mean, are you serious? This man has said openly in multiple interviews that he wants to destroy the United States. He put all of his money into very like Open Society Foundation, for example, which then helped fund DAs all over the country, like Alvin Bragg, who refused to prosecute criminals and then went after innocent people like Trump. If you don't really want to, Trump's on his, okay, well, how about Daniel Penny? Really? Saved an entire car, potentially, subway car, from a crazy man, threatening to stab everybody. And Alvin Bragg goes after him. He's there because of George Soros's money. This is like watching an episode of The Twilight Zone. It really is. And, again, as they're going out the door, what do you expect from demons? It's like an exorcism has been performed, sort of. Again, it's an analogy. And this is their sort of last great stand. They know they're losing power. They're about to be driven out of the possessed body. So let's stink the joint up as much as we possibly can and scream and cause the loudest, most horrible commotion possible. And let's give you the big FU on the way out.
Right, exactly. Yeah, as bad as the Clinton and Cheney awards were, the Soros thing is so beyond the pale. It's almost mystifying. But because this is an evil man, an evil man. He
helped round up fellow Jews to ship them off to death camps in Europe. He was part of. I'm like, what? You're giving this guy the U.S. Medal of Freedom?
Yeah. His whole and because of his ruthlessness. He's gifted, intellectually, financially, all that. But because of his ruthlessness and his lack of scrupulosity, he has amassed an immense fortune, billions and billions of dollars. And for example, with Elon Musk, we can see what can happen if that power, that influence is channeled into something good. Well, Soros has channeled his wealth, his power, his influence into chaos, into actively destabilizing the United States and countries across the West. Speaking of Elon, he gave an interview to Joe Rogan, who's on the Joe Rogan podcast, in late 2023, and he flat out told Rogan what he thought of Soros. And I think this is a very, very astute, solid analysis of George Soros. We've got a clip from that interview. Let's take a listen.
And Soros, I don't know. He had a very difficult upbringing. In my opinion, he fundamentally hates humanity. That's my opinion.
Really?
Yeah. He's doing things that erode the fabric of civilization. Getting DAs elected who refuse to prosecute crime. That's part of the problem in San Francisco and LA and a bunch of other cities. So why would you do that?
Was it humanity or is it just the United States as a whole?
He's pushing things in other countries too.
He's doing the same thing?
Yeah. Now, George at this point is pretty old. He's not, he's basically a bit senile at this point. But he's very smart. And he's very good at arbitrage. Famously he shorted the British pound. That's sort of how I think he made his first money, was shorting the pound. So he's good at spotting, basically arbitrage, like spotting value for money that other people don't see. So one of the things he noticed was that that the value for money in local races is much higher than it is in national races. So the lowest value for money is a presidential race. Then next lowest value for money is a Senate race, then a Congress, and but once you get to sort of city and state district attorneys, the value for money is extremely good. And Soros realized that you don't actually need to change the laws, you just need to change how they're enforced. If nobody chooses to enforce the law, or the laws are differentially enforced, it's life-changing.
All right, yeah, and he's right. Soros is nothing if not strategic. And he spotted an incredible opportunity to spread chaos, to undermine the United States at every turn, by funding people, by funding fellow travelers, basically at not necessarily at the highest level of government, but in prominent areas of government, district attorneys. We were just talking about earlier in the show about the condition of New York and cities across the United States. Why is that happening? It's largely because of Soros and his influence. He has targeted over many years. He has targeted dozens and dozens of races, 75 district attorney races, actually. He poured $40 million into these races over the years to basically put people who saw the world like he does, radical progressivism, very soft on crime, to basically, implement his vision across the United States. And when you do that, you don't have to capture
important to mention, it's an anti-God vision. It's not just a godless vision. It's an anti-God vision of the world, or more importantly, of man. And that's what makes this whole uniparty thing and the party of death, it makes them who they are. I mean, they are, they may not realize it, like consciously get up in the morning, walk off to the other side of their Olympic-sized pool on their private property with 5,000 armed guards. They might not get up and go on the other side of the pool and, offer their incense to their statue of Baal in the backyard. But their action, maybe some of them do, probably some of them do, but it doesn't matter if they actively think in terms of that. This is who they serve. Whether they realize it or not doesn't really matter. If they consciously or subconsciously, beside the point. They view human beings apart from the truth that we are created in the image and likeness of God, and they're not just ignorant or absent about that. They actively oppose that view. They are anti-God and therefore anti-Christ, because, Christ adorned our human nature by absorbing it or bringing it up into the divine nature. And it was always created for this purpose. And they reject that. And they reject it because the devil's their father. It's that simple.
Yeah, exactly. And again, Soros has not had, through his Open Society's foundation, which is absolutely flush, bursting with cash. He's destabilized not just the United States, but countries across the West. For example, he basically bankrolled the legalization of abortion and so-called same-sex marriage in Ireland through a massive, by funding NGOs, these shadowy groups, basically, that are not accountable to governments, by funneling millions and millions of dollars into Irish and international NGOs to help sway public opinion, basically in favor of killing the unborn, in favor of so-called same-sex marriage and so forth. And therefore, thus Ireland, once Catholic Ireland, became the first nation in the world to legalize abortion by popular vote and to legalize same-sex marriage by popular vote. And those votes those referendums were just a couple of years apart, earlier, about 8 years ago, 6 to 8 years ago. So, I mean, that's another case where he's basically sowing the seeds of chaos, basically declaring war on the unborn of Ireland. He declares war. He's like really just a malicious misanthrope. He really is. And we've seen this all across the West. Perhaps some of his biggest impact has been in helping fuel and facilitate the migrant crisis. Here in the United States, it's largely a result of the open borders. We've got millions of illegal immigrants coming into this country. Elsewhere, that's happening in Europe too. But at the same time, he's helped bankroll campaigns for legal massive immigration programs. Like in Canada, Canada is overwhelmed. The reason that Trudeau is resigned earlier this week, the reason why Canada has flatlined economically, the housing prices are through the roof. It's because they have literally, they're importing millions of immigrants legally, according to Canadian law, into the country. Soros has bankrolled this. He has funded this. He's done this all across the West. So when you see images of London, of Paris, of Stockholm in flames, you wonder why? The answer is George Soros.
Yep, there it is. Again, big middle finger to MAGA. I mean, that's what this really is. And everything MAGA stands for. It's not really MAGA per se. It's just the whole thing. Just before we go to commercial, because we've got to come back, we don't have that much time left. Just 15 seconds, Stephen, of Hillary, Cheney, and Soros. Which one rank them in the most offensive? You can think of that. What's the most offensive? What's the first? What's the second? What's the third?
Not a fan of any of them. I would say Soros, number one, because he's destabilized the United States everywhere. Literally scores of DAs that are aligning with him politically, soft on crime, and this stuff has trickled down to the very foundation of American society, but also because of his influence across the world. For the United States to award him the Medal of Freedom is an insult not only to us, the American people, but freedom-loving people everywhere. Hillary Clinton is a close second, owing just to her pernicious influence over 30 years. Liz Cheney is, she disgusts me, but she's, I don't know, she's a smaller fish, I guess you could say, but still disgusting that she was honored in this way.
Yeah. I just go to commercial break. I don't know. I think I'd put, it's the, all enemies foreign, George Soros, and domestic, Hillary. I don't know. It's kind of hard to make a distinction there. I'm just going to be a contrarian and say I'd make Hillary the number one. Mm-hmm. She tried to interfere with our ability to elect. There's a direct subversion attempt of the entire U.S. judicial system, starting in the White House. She was Secretary of State when all that was going on, before she was candidate. And I don't know. See both things. What do you think at home?
Yeah.
All right. When we come back, it's not just Lion Biden shucking and jiving. It's others in his administration as well, participating in all the evil right to the bitter end. And yes, all of this is evil because it's based on deliberate lies, and that is always the work of Satan, the father of lies. If you like what we do here and how we approach and discuss all these present current affairs, please click on that donate button on this page and help us continue doing this work. We'll be right back.
Just like all of you, I had problems sleeping. I had tried every pillow out there and nothing worked. I'd flip-flop all night, use my arm for support, and fall asleep, or I'd wake up with a sore neck or maybe a headache. Well, quality sleep comes from keeping your neck straight at night. You have to fill in that space between your head and your bed. That's why I invented MyPillow. MyPillow's patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs, and it doesn't matter if you sleep on your back, stomach, side, or any combination of all three.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night, and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get Classic King MyPillows for only $19.98. Queen size just $18.98. Standard Classic MyPillows only $14.98. That's right, only $14.98. Plus all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
All right, Stephen, a day or so ago, Attorney General Merrick Garland published a statement, you see here, lauding the 5 officers who died defending the Capitol on J6 4 years ago. It's all official and stuff now because there it is in a DOJ statement. But, of course, it's all a giant lie. And here's the lie. Quote, the 5 officers who lost their lives in the line of duty as a result of what happened to them on January 6th, 2021, closed quote. That's very carefully wordsmithed, of course, not out and out saying they all died on J6, killed by the rioters. But that's the message Merrick Garland wants the casual reader to take away from it. But the truth is, not one officer was killed on that day. None of the 5 who died eventually sustained any injuries on J6. One officer, Susnick, God rest his soul, died of natural causes the next day. He had a heart attack the next day. And the coroner said, it's nothing to do with anything that happened the day before. And the 4 other officers who died each committed suicide over the following weeks and months. So when we look at this statement, we have it up right there for you to look at. It's just a straight up lie. Stephen, I mean, Merrick Garland, look, Biden can't do any of this stuff unless he has people around him who are loyal to him and loyal to their worldview of disrupting and anti-God and all of that stuff. That Merrick Garland, God, could you imagine him on the Supreme Court? Ugh. If Mitch McConnell did do one thing right, he prevented that from happening. Anyway, your thoughts on the continuing lies, not just by Biden and the Medal of Freedom and all that, but these guys, boy, on the way out the door, they just want to stink the place up.
Yes, they do. Garland has weaponized the justice system against the United States, against our people, our citizens, and here again, he's basically. He lays out a falsehood, telling us that what we see, what our eyes have seen, it's not to be believed. Peddling false narratives as they always do. This again, I've said this many times. I'm going to come back to it again. This is why I'm so grateful for social media now, for X specifically, because we're able to uncover and inform others about these lies, because they've got the legacy media in their pocket, peddling all their falsehoods, their ridiculous narratives, and unfortunately, there are too many casual viewers in the United States. Too many people who consume news, consume information casually or piecemeal, and so for a long time that worked because there was no alternative to those particular channels, but. Thanks be to God, we have that now.
Yeah, we really do. There's there's this continuum. I'm just going to call it what it is, bullshit narrative about what happened on J6, and Trump inciting it, and all the violence and all of that. Was there violence? Yeah. Was it an insurrection? An insurrection? Really? I mean, you show up to an insurrection armed with flagpoles and signs, and you peacefully walk in between the velvet ropes. Some people were violent. It's not the vast majority of people were not violent. The vast majority of that crowd that left and walked down the street, by the way, the rioting had already begun before that even happened. The vast majority of people never even really set foot on Capitol grounds, much less stormed the Capitol. And even the ones who stormed the Capitol, if you've got to put quotes around storm, the doors were opened for them. Were some violent? Yeah. Were they beating up on cops? Yeah. Should they be punished for that? Absolutely. That is not what the vast majority of those people were there for. They were overrunning the Capitol and insurrection and all that. But let's turn to the ladies of The View, shall we? The oracle of all contemporary honesty and truth. Here's Sonny Houston from The View, still promoting all that propaganda.
I just remember after January 6th, you had someone like Mitch McConnell placing the blame on January 6th where it belonged, squarely on Donald Trump's shoulders. Mm-hmm. And then you started seeing people backtrack that and losing their moral center. You had Condoleezza Rice, I believe, on this very show saying, we need to move on from January 6th. I say no. You don't move on because January 6th was an atrocity. It was one of the worst moments in American history. And when you think about the worst moments in American history, like World War II, things that happened, like the Holocaust, chattel slavery, we need to never forget because past becomes prologue if you forget any race.
Oh my gosh. Never stops with these guys, Stephen. You do have to give them, you got to give them, gold stars and brownie points and things for, being persistent. They certainly are persistent.
They are. Yes, they are persisting in their evil. It just absolutely boggles the mind when you listen to stuff like that. Comparing January 6th, making it akin to some of the worst tragedies in human history. It's literally
January.
Because
Sonny Houston said January 6th was like World War II. World War II. What?
Yeah.
I mean, the hyperbolic language. I mean, that I don't know what you just call it. It was like the fall of the Roman Empire, or I mean, World War II. 9,000 U.S. troops died on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Sorry, within 24 hours of D-Day. Sorry, 9,000 troops. Really? That was one day's battle in World War II. You compare the entire war to what happened on J6. Give me a break. She's just stupid.
Oh yeah, exactly. It really is hard. It's hard for me to respond because it is so stupid. It is so ludicrous. Now the unfortunate thing is they do have a lot of viewers, and a lot of viewers who watch them and probably nothing else or very little else, or CNN, maybe MSNBC, and so they're not hearing truth.
Well, you got to be stupid to listen to stupid people and make that your conclusion. That's what it is. You got to be stupid. And a point that we didn't actually touch on, but is relevant here. There are no blue states. There's just blue cities. And given the fact that somewhere around 40-ish% of those residents, 40% of the total vote comes from those blue cities, and most of it is blue. Obviously, is Democrat/communist. You have smatterings here and there in other places, of red counties, and 5 or 10% vote blue, that sort of thing. But it's those blue cities. You go through those blue cities that are run by blue dictators, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, all of them. You move through those, and you think to yourself, how stupid does the population have to be to listen to stuff like this and believe it's true? It really is. It's not a problem really of elites and not elites and young or old and this and that. It really is a question of the cities versus everything else, because there's something, for some reason, in the psyche of individuals that has seized hold within the cities, within the urban areas of America. And I don't mean by urban black. I mean giant population centers have become malleable. And that I'd be very interested to read some sort of study on all of that. It's very interesting that whatever's going on here with the denial of God and the denial of life and all of it, listening to absolutely stupid claims that the insurrection was worse than World War II. I mean, there's something wrong there in the cities. And I don't know, you can just say, well, it's because they're governed by blue people, blue politicians. Well, yeah, but they're governed by blue politicians because those blue politicians are voted into office by those populaces. So there's something lower. You peel back the onions, there's something lower there. Anyway, we only got about 30 seconds left, Stephen. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts, just answering your point there. I think it's beyond just matters of low information voters, although those are certainly out there. I ultimately think you classified this as an anti-God movement, as anti-God actors. I think that has a lot to do with it. I think there's a massive spiritual blindness, a spirit of deception that has fallen across so much of America. America's cities, I think, are infested with that spirit of deception. If you get far enough from God, you're not going to recognize truth. You're not even going to recognize common sense. And that is unfortunately what has happened to far too many of our countrymen. And you see it up in Canada as well. You know, the country is absolutely circling the drain. And yet there are millions of Canadians this very day who are still supporting Justin Trudeau and his Marxist policies. It is a deception. It's a self-deception, and it's a diabolical deception.
Yeah, it certainly is. All right, we'll leave it there for today, but these are the sorts of things we talk about all the time here because they need to be talked about. It's always on the canvas of the spiritual, good versus evil. Stephen, thanks, brother. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right, again, if you like what we do here, how we do it at Souls and Liberty, please click on that donate button on the page and help us keep doing it. For now, I'm Gary Michael Voris coming to you from Houston, Texas. Yeehaw! God love you.